An Aston Martin should be one thing above everything else, that is, beautiful to look at.
The previous Vantage certainly was. It was simple with perfect proportions and exquisite surfacing. This new Vantage, well, it's not so simple. It's actually quite a busy design. It's got these very narrow eyes at the front and down here what looks like a trout pout.
And at the rear you'll find what looks to me like a big pair of lips puckering up for a kiss. But the longer I look at the new Vantage, the more I like it. It looks tough and muscly, all biceps and deltoids. It's as though it spends every waking hour in the gym.
This Vantage is very much new Aston Martin, new exterior design language, new platform, new mechanical hardware. Aston Martin right now is a brand transformed. For my money, the most exciting performance car brand on the planet. This car, its Vantage, the most affordable model in the range, is Aston Martin's bread and butter.
Gone is the old 4.7 litre normally aspirated V8. In its place, mounted low and as far back in the chassis as possible for optimal weight distribution, is a 4 litre V8 with 2 turbochargers. It's borrowed from Mercedes AMG. It delivers 503 brake horsepower and 505 pounds-foot of torque, both massively more than you got from the old car. 62 miles per hour flashes by in 3.5 seconds. The top speed is 195 miles per hour.
It costs £121,000. The Vantage is Aston Martin's pop at the Porsche 911 Carrera S, a car that costs almost £30,000 less.
But the Vantage is littered with clever hardware and modern technologies. There's an electronically controlled limited slip differential at the rear with dynamic torque vectoring to deploy all that power and torque. Suspension is by double wishbones at the front and a multi-link setup at the rear with adaptive dampers as standard. The brakes are vast. You'll find 400mm discs on the front axle and, of course, you get a full range of driving modes as well. You cycle through them using these thumb toggle switches on the steering wheel here. The one on the right is for the driving mode. So you start in sport mode, that's the default mode. Then you can go into sport plus and then track. And then on the left, you can choose your damper setting independently of the drive mode. That's very clever. Although sometimes you find yourself jabbing at these buttons more than once to make them do anything. The Vantage is a strict two-seater. You won't squeeze anybody in behind the seats, although there is a useful storage area there, plus a sizable shelf beyond it. The boot itself is actually quite generous. I love the seating position. You sit so low, steering wheel comes out to meet you, great support from the seats. It's a really evocative view out ahead of you. Now, this part of the dashboard is very busy with all these knobs and buttons. It looks like a Scrabble board 2 hours into a game. This infotainment system, like the engine, is lifted out of a Mercedes. It's not the latest system, but it's still good, it's intuitive, it works, and that hasn't always been the case with Aston Martins. With this one, you get all the stuff you'd expect. You get a DAB radio, mobile phone connectivity, Bluetooth, sat-nav, and all the rest of it. Once you're rolling, the car feels quite compact. That's because it is. So it's easy to thread down a narrow city street and easy to position on the road as well. It's not intimidating. The ride quality is firm. There is attention to the ride quality, but crucially, it's not uncomfortable. There's enough give, enough pliancy in the suspension that the ride doesn't become jarring and very rigid. Overall, the Vantage is pretty refined. On the motorway, you do get a fair amount of tyre roar, so the cabin is always quite noisy, but the steering is light. The automatic gearbox is very smooth. The 8-speed auto is the only transmission option for now. Later on, Aston Martin will offer a traditional manual gearbox as well. All things considered, this new Vantage is a much easier car to live with day by day than the previous model, but of course it still has a wild side, so stick it into Sport Plus, take control of the gears yourself using these paddles mounted on the steering column, and the thing really wakes up. The engine is a proper monster. Bundles of power and torque, really good throttle response, so actually you can hardly tell that it's turbocharged, and it's a good energetic engine as well with a great soundtrack. I do still miss that 4.7 litre normally aspirated V8 from the previous Vantage. It was such a wonderful engine with an amazing character and an even more stirring soundtrack. But as far as the new batch of turbocharged V8 motors go, this one, it's one of the best. The Vantage is very much Aston Martin's dedicated sports car. It does need to be usable every day, but the DB11 and the DBS Superleggera are the company's grand tourists. So does it stack up? Well, this Vantage is so dynamically competent. It's enormously agile. It's got tons and tons of grip, a really beautifully balanced chassis, steering that's so alert, so accurate, no play in it at all. There's an awful lot to like about it. It's got really good traction as well. I happen to adore the previous Vantage. It wasn't just good on a winding mountain road like this one, it was sensationally good. For me, this new model just doesn't quite reach those same high notes in terms of the way the chassis feels. The previous car, its chassis was beautifully fluid. It would flow along these roads perfectly. This one just feels a little bit more tight, a little bit more tense. It doesn't have that same exquisite body control. It feels heavier. However, it's got more grip, it's got more performance, it's so much faster. So it's a difficult car to criticise, this one, in terms of how it manages with a tricky road, except that I found myself having more fun in the previous version. But if I put that model to one side, the previous car, if I ignore that one and assess this one in isolation, it's so good. It's fun to drive, it's really competent, and it's got stacks of performance as well. Fast, fun to drive, striking to look at, usable day to day. Is the new Vantage a triumph?
Do you know? I think it is. It demonstrates what the revitalised Aston Martin is capable of, but at £121,000, it doesn't come cheap. Thank you very much for watching. Please hit the thumbs up button, comment below, please subscribe to the Car Gurus YouTube channel, and remember to head to cargurus.co.uk because that's where you will find the used car you're looking for from a top-rated dealer.